Yeah, a little surreal, of course, but I loved every minute of it.
The Texas sun was sinking low, draping Willie Nelson's studio in a honey-colored glow. The old farmhouse walls were lined with gold records and framed memories, photos of outlaws, poets, and friends who'd long since taken their final bow. But tonight, it wasn't fame that filled the air. It was reflection. Willie, now 92, sat quietly with Trigger, his beat-up guitar, resting across his lap like an old friend that had seen it all. NTHE years had softened his edges, but sharpened his heart. His braided hair, now silver, swung gently as he nodded to a slow rhythm only he could hear. The tape recorder on the desk was already rolling, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. NHE took a slow drag from his joint, let the smoke curl upward, and smiled. "You live long enough," he said, his voice still carrying that soft, smoky twang, "and you stop pretending you forgot the good ones. NTHE good ones." That's what he called them. Not lovers, not muses, but something purer. The women who left fingerprints on his soul and shaped the course of his music. He leaned back in his chair, eyes glinting beneath the brim of his hat. "People always ask me about the wild days," he said. "The parties, the buses, the headlines. But the truth is, the real stories, they're about the women who could outsing, outwrite, and outlove just about anyone who ever picked up a mic." NHE chuckled softly. "6 of them to be exact." And a pause lingered, not of sadness but reverence. These women weren't fleeting chapters in Willie's story. They were the backbone of the genre he helped to define. Each of them had carved out her own truth, and somewhere between the heartbreaks and the high notes, they had carved him too. NHE picked up Trigger and brushed the strings lightly. "Every song I've ever written," he said, "had a bit of one of them in it. Maybe a phrase, maybe a melody, maybe just a feeling. You don't get to 92 without realizing that the best songs don't come from fame. They come from the people who made you feel something worth writing about." And outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying echoes of the past. Laughter, applause, maybe even a faint chorus from somewhere deep in memory. And Willie tapped the side of his guitar, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I've sung with outlaws, played with legends," he said. "But these 6 women, they were something else entirely. Each one taught me a different kind of truth. About music. About love. About standing tall when life tries to knock you flat." NHE smiled, lines deepening around his eyes. "You could say they built country music from both sides, the stage and the soul." NHE reached for a photograph nearby, a black and white shot of him and a much younger Dolly Parton laughing during a TV special. The image glowed faintly in the lamplight, like a captured burst of joy. "That's the thing about Dolly," he murmured. "She don't just shine. She lights up everyone around her." Then, almost as if realizing where the story should begin, he nodded to himself. You can't talk about country music without starting with Dolly. NBUT before he got there. He wanted to explain something deeper. "See, folks think we all compete in this business," he said. "That we're fighting for the same song, the same stage, the same love from the crowd. But I never saw it that way. The good ones, the real ones, they weren't competition. They were the reason you tried harder. You hear one of them sing, and suddenly, you want to write something worthy of that voice." NHE chuckled again, softer this time. "A preacher once told me, 'The Lord speaks through many voices.' Well, I think he must have had a soft spot for country women, 'cause he sure gave them some of the finest voices I've ever heard." NHE strummed a few bars of Crazy, that timeless melody Patsy Cline had once transformed into a classic. The chords were slow, tender, a hymn to the past. "Patsy was the first one who really believed in me," he said. "She took a chance on a scruffy songwriter with a song nobody else wanted. She sang it, and suddenly the whole world wanted to feel that way." His voice caught for just a second. Not sadness, but awe. It's something when somebody takes your song and makes it eternal. Patsy did that. Then he smiled again, a little mischievous this time. And Loretta Lynn? Lord, that woman was a pistol. She'd walk into a room full of suits in Nashville and make every one of them sit up straight. She didn't wait for permission to be herself. She just was. I loved that about her. Still do. NHE looked around his studio, at the posters, the instruments, the quiet ghosts of a life lived on the road. When I think about country music now, he said, I don't think about the charts or the awards. I think about the voices that made it honest. NHE paused, then added, these six, Dolly, Emmylou, Patsy, Loretta, Tammy, and Reba, they kept this thing alive. Without them, I don't think half of us would have known what real country sounds like. Willie leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes gleaming with both mischief and memory. They weren't just singers, he said. They were storytellers. Each one carried her own storm. And if you listened close enough, you could feel the thunder in every line. NHE picked up his coffee mug, a chipped one with the words, "On the road again," faded across it, and raised it slightly toward the ceiling, as if toasting unseen friends. Here's to the six, he said. The light, the prayer, the storm, the rebel, the strength and the flame. NFOR a moment, silence filled the room again, heavy and holy. Then he added, almost in a whisper, they made me believe that music could save a soul. Maybe even mine. And outside, the last bit of sunlight slipped behind the trees, and the stars began to shimmer above the Texas plains. Willie set down his cup, ran a weathered hand across his guitar, and smiled that slow, knowing smile. Well, he said softly, let's start with the light that never dims. And with that, the old outlaw began to tell his stories. Willie Nelson leaned back in his chair, a faint grin tracing the edges of his weathered face. You can't talk about country music without startin' with Dolly, he said, his voice rolling like an old record, warm, a little cracked, but full of life. NHE reached over to the cluttered shelf behind him and picked up a small framed photo. Dolly Parton in one of her early TV appearances. Rhinestones shimmering like 1,000 tiny stars. Her smile could outshine the stage lights, and even now, decades later, it still did. She's got that kind of magic you can't fake, Willie murmured. The kind that makes the whole damn room feel brighter. NHE laughed to himself. I remember the first time I heard her sing. I was driven through Nashville, radio turned up, and there she was. This little mountain voice that could cut straight through your bones. I had to pull the truck over, sat there on the shoulder of the road just listening, because I knew I was hearing something special, pure, honest. No tricks, no polish, just heart. Willie set the photo back down, eyes still caught in the memory. That's what makes Dolly different, he said. She builds songs like a craftsman builds a cabin. Every word's a nail, every melody a beam. You stand inside one of her songs, and it feels like home. NHE chuckled again, low and affectionate. People see the wigs, the glitter, the jokes, and don't get me wrong, she loves all that. But behind all the rhinestones is one of the sharpest writers this world's ever known. She can make you laugh 1 minute and break your heart the next. Willie paused, a wistful look crossing his eyes. I've seen folks underestimate her all my life. They see the big hair and the curves and they think that's the whole story. But Dolly? She's got more wit than most of Nashville put together. She writes her own deals, owns her own songs, runs her own empire, and she does it all while making everybody around her feel like family. NHE strummed a lazy chord, letting it hang in the air. You know what else about Dolly? She never forgot where she came from. Sevierville, Tennessee. Dirt roads, church pews, and hand-me-down dreams. I've met a lot of stars who try to bury their roots once they make it big. But Dolly, she waters hers. Every song she writes grows out of that same red clay she was born on. Willie smiled softly, remembering the first time they shared a stage. It was a benefit concert back in the 70s, he said. I was playing second guitar and Dolly walked in like a sunrise in heels. The crowd went wild before she even sang a note. Then she started into Coat of Many Colors, and I swear, you could feel the whole place go still. You could hear folks breathe in, that's how quiet it got. NHE shook his head. That song, man, that's what country music's supposed to be. Not just fancy words and sad chords, but truth. A mother's love, a child's pride, the kind of dignity that comes from having nothing, but still holding your head high. That's Dolly's gift. She turns her own life into poetry, and she never makes herself the victim. She just tells it like it is, and somehow it makes you stronger. NHE took a sip of his coffee, then added with a grin, "And she's funny as hell too. I remember one time backstage, I asked her how she keeps her energy up. She looked me dead in the eye and said, 'Honey, I get my energy from Jesus, caffeine, and sequins.' I told her that was a better lyric than half the stuff on the radio." Willie's laughter filled the room, soft and genuine. But then his tone shifted, growing quieter, more thoughtful. "You know, I've been around a long time," he said. "I've seen people come and go. Fame burns out fast. But Dolly, she burns steady. She don't fade, she don't falter. She's like a campfire in the middle of a storm. Always there, always warm." NHE looked up toward the ceiling, as if addressing some unseen audience. She could have stopped 100 times. She could have cashed out, disappeared, let her legacy do the talking. But she never did. She keeps showing up. For her fans, for her family, for the folks who still believe a song can change something. Then, with a glint in his eye, Willie said, "I've always said Dolly's a preacher in disguise. She don't need a pulpit. Her stage is her church. She'll make you laugh your way into a revelation." NHE leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I've sung with her a few times, and let me tell you, it's like standing too close to fireworks. Beautiful, loud, and impossible to ignore. You can feel her spirit in every note. She don't just sing a song, she blesses it." And a long silence followed, the kind of silence that carries 1,000 untold thoughts. Then Willie spoke again, voice low and tender. "I think about how many folks she's helped. All the kids at her imagination library getting free books. All the people she's lifted up just by being kind. That's what I mean when I call her the light that never dims. It's not the fame, it's not the rhinestones, it's her heart." NHE tapped his chest lightly. "She shines from the inside out. And even when life throws her pain, loss, judgment, heartache, she turns it into a song the whole world can sing along to." And Willie smiled again, that faraway look still in his eyes. "You know, I've written a lot of songs about love, but if you want to hear what real love sounds like, not romance, but the kind that makes you better just by standing near it, you listen to Dolly Parton. That woman don't just write love songs, she is one." NHE reached for trigger again and brushed the strings gently, humming a few soft bars of Islands in the Stream. The melody floated through the room like smoke. "That one," he said, "that's a memory that never grows old. We sang it 100 times, and it still felt new every time. 'Cause that's what Dolly does. She makes everything feel like the first time you heard it." NTHE tape recorder clicked softly as it reached the end of its reel, but Willie didn't notice. He was lost in thought now, eyes half closed, voice fading to a whisper. "Dolly Parton," he said, "is proof that light don't fade. It just finds new ways to shine." NHE smiled, almost to himself. Now that's one hell of a woman. The night had grown quieter. Outside Willie's window, the crickets had taken over where the daylight left off, their soft chorus blending with the hum of an old ceiling fan. He adjusted the brim of his hat and smiled faintly. "Now, Emmylou," he said almost in a whisper, "that woman don't sing, she prays." NHI's tone changed when he said her name. The easy mischief he'd had while talking about Dolly softened into something else. Reverence. The kind you only use when you're talking about someone who changed you without even trying. "I remember the first time I heard her voice," Willie said. "Wasn't even seen her, just heard her. I was walking past a studio in Nashville, back when every other building had a fiddle inside. I stopped, stood there in the hallway and thought, Lord, that's what truth sounds like. It wasn't fancy, wasn't trying to impress anybody. It was just real, like she was singing straight from her soul to yours." NHE chuckled quietly. "I had to ask the engineer, who's that angel in there?" He told me, "That's Emmylou Harris." And I never forgot that name. Willie leaned back, the glow of the desk lamp flickering across his face. "Now, "A lot of singers can hit the right notes," he said, "but Emmylou hits the right feelings. There's a difference. She don't perform a song, she lives inside it." NHE ran a finger along the edge of his guitar. "You ever notice," he continued, "how her voice can make you feel like you're sitting in church and at a campfire at the same time? She's got that strange magic, peace and ache all wrapped up together. Like a sunset that's too beautiful to look at without hurting a little." NHE smiled softly. "That's what I call grace." There was a long silence before he spoke again, as if the next words needed room to breathe. "I've sung with Emmylou a few times," he said. "Every time, I feel like I'm being invited into a prayer. She don't overpower you, she lifts you up. You find yourself singing better just because you're trying to meet her honesty halfway." NHE laughed gently, shaking his head. "You can't fake that kind of truth. It ain't about practice or fame or awards. It's about living through enough life that your voice starts telling the truth, whether you want it to or not. That's Emmylou. Every line she sings has lived a lifetime before it reaches your ear." Willie's eyes grew distant. "I remember when Graham Parsons passed," he said softly. "That broke her heart, but instead of hidden from the pain, she carried it with her, turned it into music. You could hear the grief, sure, but you could also hear the love. That's when I knew she was special. Some folks drown in sorrow. Emmylou builds cathedrals out of it." NHE paused again, fingers idly picking at his guitar strings. The sound was low, almost mournful, like an old hymn echoing across a church with no one left inside. "When she sings Boulder to Birmingham," he said, "it's like the whole world stops to listen. There's no crowd big enough to fill the silence that song leaves behind. You just sit there, eyes wet, heart open, thinking about everyone you ever lost and everyone you still love." NHE let out a slow sigh. "That's the kind of power she's got. Not the kind that fills stadiums, but the kind that fills souls." Willie smiled again, remembering something that lightened his tone. "She's humble too. You try to compliment her, she just smiles that quiet smile of hers and changes the subject. Doesn't matter how many Grammys she's got. She'll talk more about her horses than her career." NHE laughed, then grew thoughtful once more. "Maybe that's why her music never feels like it's for show. She don't chase attention. She chases truth. And when you do that long enough, people start following you, whether you mean to or not." NHE leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know, Emmylou's voice is the closest thing I've ever heard to forgiveness. She'll sing a heartbreak and make it sound like a blessing. She'll take a song about loss and make it feel like hope. That's rare, real rare." The old man looked around his studio, his eyes drifting over old tour photos and fading posters. "I've played with every kind of singer there is. The wild ones, the loud ones, the ones who wanted to be stars so bad they'd burn out before they hit the charts. But Emmylou never wanted to be a star. She wanted to be true. And that's what she is, the truest voice I know." NHE rubbed his jaw, smiling. "You can learn a lot from a voice like that. She taught me that stillness can be louder than any fiddle solo. That sometimes the softest songs last the longest." NHE thought for a long moment before continuing. "You know, people call me a songwriter," he said. "But I think singers like Emmylou, they're songwriters too, just in a different language. Every note they sing rewrites the song, makes it theirs forever." NHE chuckled again, remembering. "We once did a late-night jam session after some awards thing. Everyone was half asleep or half drunk, maybe both. And she picked up a guitar and started singing, Poncho and Lefty. Lord, it felt like she was singing to every lost soul that ever hit the road. I sat there and thought, that's what country music was born for. Stories that sound like prayers." NHE sighed softly, the air around him heavy with nostalgia. "Emmylou never had to shout to be heard. She just sings, and the world listens. And in a time where everyone's trying to scream their story the loudest, she reminds you that truth don't need a megaphone. It just needs a heart that's still beating." NTHE corner of Willie's mouth turned up, just barely. "You know, some singers fade out as they get older. But not her. Her voice, it's aged like a fine whiskey, smoother, deeper, wiser. You hear it now, and it still sounds like home. NHE set his guitar aside and looked straight ahead, his voice low and steady. "If Dolly's the light," he said, "then Emmyloo's the prayer that keeps it burnin'. You don't forget a voice like that. You carry it with you." NHE leaned back in his chair, eyes closed now, the ghost of a melody floating around him. "Yeah," he murmured, "she sings like she's prayin'. And maybe, in her own way, she's been prayin'. For all of us, this whole time." Willie's fingers lingered on his guitar strings, tracing a melody that felt older than time itself. When he spoke again, his voice dropped to a gentler place. "Now, Patsy," he said, shaking his head with a slow smile, "there'll never be another like her." NHE leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes alive with memory. "Patsy Cline was the first person in this business who ever really believed in me. Back then, I was just a broke songwriter knockin' around Nashville, sellin' tunes for $25 a piece, tryin' to keep gas in my car and food on the table. Most folks wouldn't even give my songs a listen. But Patsy, she did." NHE chuckled, eyes glinting. "When I wrote Crazy, nobody wanted it. Too strange, they said. Too slow. Too emotional. But Patsy heard something different. She didn't just like the song, she felt it. She took that little tune of mine and turned it into pure gold." NHE strummed the first few notes of Crazy, and even now, decades later, the air seemed to tighten around him. "When she sang it," he said softly, "it wasn't my song anymore. It was hers, and it was perfect. She sang it like she'd lived every damn word." Willie laughed again, but there was a catch in his throat. "You know what's funny? I was scared to death to play it for her. I thought she'd hate it. Her husband had to drag me to her house one night and make me sing it." Patsy was laid up in bed. She'd just been in a car accident, bruised up and sore. But even from that bed, she listened like a queen hearin' a confession. When I finished, she looked at me and said, "Hoss, that's the best damn song I ever heard." NHE grinned, shaking his head. That was Patsy, tough as boot leather, soft as a hymn. She had a laugh that could fill a room and a heart big enough to fit every fool and dreamer in Nashville. Then his tone turned quiet, reverent. But more than anything, she had courage. Patsy didn't care who told her no. She didn't play by the rules, 'cause she knew the rules weren't made for women like her. She was fearless in a time when women were told to stay sweet, stay quiet, stay grateful. Patsy said to hell with that. She was gonna sing her truth, loud and proud. NHE took a deep breath, the corners of his eyes softening. She stood up for people too. If a new artist got pushed around by a label or a manager, Patsy was the first one to speak up. She believed in fairness. She believed in loyalty. She was country music's big sister, the kind that'd fight your battles even when she was fightin' her own. Willie's voice cracked just a little. "When we lost her in that plane crash, I don't think Nashville was ever the same. It wasn't just the voice we lost. It was the heart, the fearlessness." NHE stared down at his guitar for a long moment before continuing. "Sometimes I still hear her laughin'. Sometimes I'll be writin' a song and I'll think, would Patsy sing this? And if the answer's no, I keep workin' till it's good enough for her." NHE smiled then, a small, wistful smile. "She made me believe I could really do this. Before her, I was just another songwriter in a smoky bar, waitin' on luck. After her, I had faith. That's what she gave me. Faith in my music. Faith in myself." Willie plucked one more quiet chord, the sound trembling in the stillness. "Patsy Cline," he said finally, "taught me that country music ain't about being safe. It's about being honest, even when it scares you. She turned heartbreak into power. And that's what makes her timeless." NHE looked up, eyes shining. Patsy was the storm that made the world listen. Willie chuckled softly as he adjusted his hat, the corners of his eyes creasing with mischief. "Now, Loretta," he said. She was a firecracker wrapped in lace. NHE leaned back in his chair, remembering the first time he saw her on stage. She was barefoot singing about her man and her mama, and all the things most folks were too polite to talk about. I remember thinking, Lord, Nashville ain't ready for her. But that was the beauty of Loretta. She didn't wait for permission. She just kicked the damn door open and made herself at home. And Willie's laugh filled the room, but there was pride in it too. She had this way of speaking her mind without ever losing her grace. You could tell she meant every word. When she sang "The Pill" or "Don't Come Home a-Drinkin'," she wasn't just singing to entertain. She was telling the truth about what women were living through. That took guts, and she had plenty. NHE picked up his old guitar and strummed a slow rhythm, one that carried the weight of dusty honky-tonks and small-town stages. Loretta was from Butcher Hollow, Kentucky, a coal miner's daughter, just like she said. She came up hard, but she carried her past like a badge, not a burden. And that's what made her songs hit home. You didn't have to be from Kentucky to understand her. You just had to have lived a little. Willie's voice softened. She used to say, "If you're gonna write a song, write it plain enough so folks can see themselves in it." And that's exactly what she did. Loretta didn't write about movie stars or fancy cars. She wrote about laundry and heartbreak and fighting with your husband over supper. Everyday life, but she made it poetry. NHE smiled, remembering her laughter. And Lord, could she make you laugh. I once told her I thought "You Ain't Woman Enough" was one of the boldest songs I'd ever heard. She winked and said, "Well, honey, it's only bold if it's true." That was Loretta, sweet as pie, sharp as a switchblade. NHI's tone grew tender. But she wasn't just a rebel. She was kind. She never looked down on nobody. When younger artists came to town, scared and lost, Loretta was the one who'd call M up, feed M, give M advice. I've seen her give the shirt off her back, literally, if she thought someone needed it more. NHE paused for a moment, eyes distant. I think she knew what it felt like to be alone in a world that didn't expect much from you. And instead of letting that bitterness eat her up, she turned it into love. Into songs, into fire. NHE chuckled softly. And she never backed down from the suits in Nashville. They'd tell her, "You can't sing that, Loretta. Radio won't play it." And she'd say, "Well, that's their loss." Next thing you know, the song's #1. She didn't bend. She made Nashville bend around her. And Willie's voice took on that mix of humor and admiration only old friends can have. I remember one night at an award show, some fella made a snide comment about her accent. Loretta just smiled sweet as honey and said, "That's not an accent, baby. That's success." Whole place went up in laughter, and that poor man learned quick not to underestimate her. NHE sighed softly, brushing the guitar strings again. You know, she never lost that spark. Even in her later years, she'd still call me up, talk about new songs she was writing, or ask how my crops were doing. She stayed curious, stayed inspired. That's how you know someone's truly an artist. They never stop seeing beauty, even after the world's tried to take it away. His voice dropped lower now, full of affection. Loretta Lynn was country music in its purest form. No filters, no fakin', just honesty, humor, and heart. She wrote for the people who didn't have a voice, and in doing so, she became one of the most powerful voices we've ever had. NHE looked out the window, where the first hint of dawn was brushing the horizon. "I miss her," he said softly, "but I can still hear her. Every time I turn on the radio, every time a young girl stands on stage and sings about her truth, that's Loretta, still speaking." NHE smiled one last time, shaking his head with that familiar warmth. She was the rebel poet of Nashville, and the funny thing is, she never meant to be. She just told the truth. And the truth, well, he looked down, tapping the side of his guitar. The truth is the most rebellious thing of all. Willie lit another cigarette, the smoke curling like a memory he couldn't quite shake. "Johnny," he said with a half-smile, "he was a storm in a black coat. You never really met Johnny Cash. You survived him." NHI's eyes softened as the flame caught the tobacco. He had that voice that could make the devil flinch and the angels cry at the same time. And I ain't exaggerating. When Johnny sang, it wasn't just music. It was confession, redemption, and rebellion, all tangled up together. The man didn't sing notes. He sang sins. NHE took a long drag, exhaling slow. I met him back when we were both barely getting by. He was this tall, quiet fella, with eyes that had seen too much, and lips that didn't talk unless they had something. real to say. But when he opened that mouth to sing, you listened. The whole room did. It was like God hit the mute button on the world for 3 minutes. Willie's gaze drifted upward, as if replaying old nights under smoky lights. Johnny used to tell me, Willie, I ain't tryin' to be a saint. I'm just tryin' not to be a fool. And that about sums him up. He wasn't perfect. Not by a long shot, but he owned his imperfections. He dragged him into the light, made M rhyme, and set M to a rhythm that the whole world could feel. NHE chuckled quietly. You know, there was this one time in the late 60s when we did a show together. He walked on stage dressed head to toe in black, crowd going wild, and someone yelled, "Why you always wear black, Johnny?" He grinned that sly grin of his and said, "For the poor and the beaten down. For the prisoner who's long paid for his crime. For the man who's never been free." The whole place went dead silent. You could feel the truth in it. Willie leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He carried the pain of others like it was his job. Maybe that's why his own demons never really left him alone. He'd been to hell, in the pills, the booze, the heartbreak. But he never stopped singing about redemption. He wanted people to know that no matter how dark it got, there was always a way back. That's a message this world still needs. NHE paused, smiling faintly. June Carter was his light. She saved him more times than anyone will ever know. I saw it with my own eyes. Johnny'd stumble in, eyes red, voice gone, and June to be right there, calm as a preacher's wife, fierce as a wildfire. She'd grab his hand and say, "Johnny, you come back to the light now," and damn if he didn't. Every time. NHI's voice grew softer. They were a storm and a sunrise, those two. They fought hard, loved harder. I think that's what made their music so timeless. You could hear the fight in it, the forgiveness, the fire. Willie took a slow sip of his coffee, the years catching up to him. Johnny Cash wasn't just a country singer. He was the conscience of America. While everyone else was singing about trucks and bars, Johnny was singing for the forgotten, the poor, the addicts, the inmates. He went into prisons and gave concerts like he was bringing gospel to the lost. Not for fame, not for money, but because he understood them. Hell, sometimes he was them. NHE chuckled again, low and raspy. You should have seen him backstage after one of those prison shows. He'd come off stage, sweat pouring, that deep grin spread across his face, and he'd say, "They needed that, Willie. But so did I, and I believed him." Johnny didn't just heal others with his music. He was trying to heal himself. NTHE room seemed quieter now. Even the hum of the night outside had softened. Willie's tone dropped to a near whisper. We all wear our darkness different. Johnny just had the courage to sing his out loud. He didn't hide from who he was. He made peace with it, or maybe he just learned to live beside it. He sighed, a long, weary sound of both pride and loss. The day he died, I played Folsom Prison Blues on my porch, couldn't finish it. I just sat there, strumming the chords, listening to the echoes. Felt like a piece of the world went quiet with him. But then I thought, nah, Johnny ain't gone. Not really. Every time a kid picks up a guitar and sings about truth instead of trends, that's Johnny. Every time someone finds grace after falling, that's Johnny. Willie smiled, eyes glistening just a bit. He used to say, "The Lord gave me a voice and a heart big enough to screw up with," and that's what he did. He loved big, failed big, believed big. That's what made him human. That's what made him great. NHE looked out the window, voice low but certain. Johnny Cash was a sinner who sang like a saint. And maybe that's the only kind of saint worth listening to. He sighed, a long, weary sound of both pride and loss. The day he died, I played Folsom Prison Blues on my porch, couldn't finish it. I just sat there, strumming the chords, listening to the echoes. Felt like a piece of the world went quiet with him. But then I thought, nah, Johnny ain't gone. Not really. Every time a kid picks up a guitar and sings about truth instead of trends, that's Johnny. Every time someone finds grace after falling, that's Johnny. Willie smiled, eyes glistening just a bit. He used to say, "The Lord gave me a voice and a heart big enough to screw up with." And that's what he did. He loved big, failed big, believed big. That's what made him human. That's what made him great. NHE looked out the window, voice low but certain. Johnny Cash was a sinner who sang like a saint. And maybe that's the only kind of saint worth listening to. In Section 7, 6 voices, 1 truth, 800 words. Willie leaned back in his chair, the soft hum of a guitar amp filling the silence. His weathered fingers tapped against his knee, as if keeping time to an old song only he could hear. Around him, the studio was lined with memories. Photographs, gold records, faded ticket stubs. But more than that, it was filled with the ghosts of voices. Voices that had carried him through decades, heartbreaks, and rebirths. NHE smiled faintly, eyes wandering across the walls. "You know," he said softly, "I've sung with a lot of folks. Some come and go, some leave a mark. And then there are the ones who change the air around you. The ones who remind you why you ever picked up a guitar in the first place. Dolly, Emmylou, Patsy, Loretta, Tammy, Reba. They weren't just singers. They were the heartbeat of everything country ever meant to be." NHE took a slow breath, almost reverent. Each of them carried something holy, and I don't mean church holy. I mean real holy. That kind of truth that sneaks up on you in a bar at midnight, or in the back of a car when the radio plays the right song. Dolly had light. Emmylou had grace. Patsy had courage. Loretta had fire. Tammy had strength. And Reba had that unstoppable drive. You put all that together, and you get the soul of country music. NHE chuckled quietly. "You know, folks ask me sometimes if I ever get tired of this life. 92 years old, still writing, still singing. But how can I get tired when I've seen them do it? Those women taught me that country ain't about age or fame or even the hits. It's about honesty. You can't fake it. Either you've lived it or you haven't." NTHE room fell still for a moment, the only sound the faint creak of the chair beneath him. He looked down at his hands. The same hands that once strummed beside legends, the same hands that wrote songs about love, loss, and redemption. "I think about Patsy sometimes," he murmured. "She believed in me when nobody else did. Took one of my songs and turned it into something eternal. She didn't just sing crazy, she felt it. That's what these women did. They felt everything. They didn't run from pain. They turned it into melody." NHE paused, the corners of his mouth lifting in a quiet smile. Loretta, now there was a force. She'd come into a room like a firecracker, light up everyone around her, and then walk out like she owned the sun. And maybe she did. You couldn't cage a soul like hers. Country music owes a lot to her, to all of them. They broke rules, and they did it with a smile. NHE leaned forward, voice lowering, softer now. "Tammy, Lord, she was gentle. Folks saw the glamour, but I saw the grit. The kind of woman who'd sing her heart out even when it was breaking. She taught me that sadness ain't weakness. It's proof you've loved deep enough to hurt. And that's what makes a song live forever." Willie took another long look around the studio. The sunlight was fading now, casting gold across the instruments, resting in quiet reverence. "And Reba," he said finally, "she's proof that the fire never really burns out. She carried the torch, not just for the women before her, but for all of us who needed to remember what real music sounded like. She's still out there doing it, still reminding folks that heart always beats louder than fame." NHE smiled, a wistful grin that carried years of laughter and loss. "When I think about them, those 6 women, I don't just see artists. I see truth-tellers, warriors, healers. They made people feel seen. And that's what art's supposed to do. NHE strummed a single chord on his old Martin guitar, the sound raw and alive. You know, people think country music's about beer and boots, but it's really about the quiet in between, the moments when you're too proud to cry, but too human not to feel. Those women, they sang that quiet. They gave it a voice. And for a moment, he said nothing more. Just sat there, the smoke curling up in lazy spirals, the echoes of 6 voices swirling in his memory. Then, almost like a prayer, he whispered, "They made me better. As a man, as a songwriter, as a soul." NHE smiled one last time, eyes closing as his fingers brushed across the strings again. Country music ain't just a sound. It's a truth, a confession. And those 6 women, they spoke it louder, braver, and more beautifully than anyone else ever could. NTHE final chord rang out, soft but unshakable, like the echo of a lifetime well lived. "So when folks ask me what keeps me singing," Willie said, his voice fading into the twilight, "I tell 'em, I'm just trying to keep their song alive."